So this was like one of the most ridiculous stories I'd ever heard last week. The fact that the University of Washington was studying how much drug residue was on public transportation. Common sense tells us that when we see so frequently people using narcotics on public transportation, buses and trains, that's probably not good to be around. That's probably not good for passengers. It's probably not good for the drivers. So the University of Washington decided to study it. They came out with its findings, and true to form, King County Metro is now spinning those findings in the best possible light. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Okay, so here is the University of Washington study. Came out last week, and the results, by any standard, were stunning. I'm not going to say surprising, because we know that buses, trains have turned into drug dens. It has been a growing issue. And so, common sense tells us that if people are using drugs on trains, on buses with frequency, that they're probably leaving some sort of residue behind. And so University of Washington, which I thought was a very good idea, went out and actually tested multiple local transit facilities and agencies. They did swabs in the air. They did swabs of hard surfaces, and the results were pretty insane. So they said they analyzed the findings from 78 air samples and 102 surface samples collected from transit vehicles. Of the 78 air samples, 25% had detectable fentanyl, 100% had detectable meth. 100%. Of the 102 surface samples, 46% had detectable fentanyl, and 98% had detectable meth. And then it wanted to say detection of fentanyl or methamphetamine by the lab does not mean it poses a health risk to operators of the riding public. And they simply said, we don't have enough data to tell us what the health implications might be. Now, I certainly hope that they continue that study. Maybe they pull some hair samples from drivers or something like that. And I'm not saying that they're lying, that UW is lying when they're saying that they don't have enough data to know the long-term implications of it. I believe that they need to continue to collect data to get that information. However, again, I go back to, and this is becoming a theme, what does common sense tell us? We know that the drugs are bad. We know that meth is harmful. We know that fentanyl is very harmful. In fact, we've been told over and over by public health officials and politicians alike that a tiny bit of fentanyl, the size of the tip of a needle, can kill you. So any traces of fentanyl, no matter how small, common sense tells us that could be deadly and that could be detrimental. However, when this study came out, King County Metro takes to its Twitter account and spins those findings in the best possible light for them, to the detriment of the traveling public and of the hardworking people who drive their buses and operate their trains. They said in a tweet, in a first-of-its-kind study, the UW released an analysis of drug smoke and residue samples collected on transit vehicles. Health officials say the levels are extremely low and riding transit remains safe. That is what they chose out of all of that information to pluck out and to put out on Twitter. That's the headline. Traveling on transit remains safe. And then I went and looked deeper. They posted it with a long post, and they acknowledged, we need to work to fix some things, etc. But the whole 100% of airborne samples had meth, nowhere to be found. No acknowledgement of it whatsoever. The downplay, they can spin anything. And I think the thing that really bothers me about this is a public entity that is we're supposed to believe, a critical public service, which I think it is, but they want more people to ride public transit. It's a taxpayer-funded entity. And they are that quick to downplay something as serious as exposure to illicit drugs. Exposure to drugs that can easily kill in small quantities. And I have to think, how are you working for the public when you do that? And as soon as this response came out from King County Metro, I was happy to see a lot of people pointing out the hypocrisy of it. When you think of cigarette smoke, for instance, since I was a tiny toddler, it's been drilled into my head about secondhand smoke will kill you. Secondhand cigarette smoke will kill you. I mean, you really think I could go on a King County bus or a metro line and light up a cigarette without people throwing a fit, as they should? I've never smoked, by the way. Not a smoker. Very proud of that. But for some reason, we almost, I don't know, for the sake of political correctness, we're not willing to assign the same obvious level of danger to the secondhand effects of meth or fentanyl. That so much so that government entities are downplaying the possible health ramifications. Can you imagine being a King County bus driver, hearing those results that 100% of air samples had meth and a lot of them had fentanyl? And King County Metro, your employer, is saying, public transit remains safe to ride. What world are we living in? And a viewer actually sent us an article from a few days ago that puts this all perfectly in perspective. We take children away from people for this kind of stuff. We charge people, rightfully so, with felonies for this kind of stuff. This was an article from the Peninsula Daily News from just August 29th. A Forks man charged with drug endangerment, hair tested from his 18-month-old, had meth in it. The article says a Forks man has been charged with 1 count of controlled substance endangerment in a case involving an 18-month-old child. John Robinson III, 35 of Forks, was charged in Clallam County Superior Court with a special allegation for domestic violence, family or household member. He was arrested Thursday after the child was found in a bedroom filled with what turned out to be methamphetamine smoke. The charge is a Class B felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison and or a $20,000 fine. That makes sense. You're exposing an 18-month-old child to meth smoke. Now he faces time in prison, up to a decade. Now I imagine he's going to lose custody of that child. Again, rightfully so. But you turn around and exposing thousands of commuters to methamphetamine smoke, to residue from fentanyl on your buses and your trains because you lack the political will to make sure that those are safe environments for the traveling public and for your riders. We're told by King County Transit that that's safe, that it remains safe. Think about that. Think about the insanity of that. Nobody believes that. And why do they think they can get away with that? The media for a long time, I think, has allowed them to get away with stuff like that. We can say anything. We can say anything and no one will challenge us on it. If you are a transit driver, a transit rider, particularly though, if that is your job for 40 hours a week working in these environments, we want to hear from you. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. We want to hear from you because I have to believe that is, if it's this infuriating to me, I have to believe that the depth of anger you're feeling about this is unreal. And again, this all goes back to, this is easily avoidable. This is part of the drug crisis. The drug crisis is to blame for almost every other societal ill that we're facing. The crime crisis, the homelessness crisis, the mental health crisis. It all boils down to drugs. Yet we have a guy who is poised to become the next governor of Washington who said in 2021 that he wanted state lawmakers to decriminalize possession. He wanted individual drug use and possession not to be a criminal matter anymore. Given the circumstances that we're in, it's my opinion that that should be disqualifying. But this is the circumstance that we're in. We have people at the highest levels who have let the drug crisis become so bad that it has spilled out into every aspect of society, including public transportation. And the agency in charge of it wants you to believe that everything is just fine. Everything is not fine. And shame on them for saying so. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. You can turn your frustration into action. Please do at future42.org. You can find out about opportunities to push back against ridiculousness like that.